Hey Definers, quick note, this episode is sponsored by Atrius. Atrius makes buildings and spaces smarter, safer, and greener with solutions for sustainable building performance, streamlined enterprise operations, and personal experiences. Learn more at atrius.com.
All right, Definers, we have here for you Atypical episode number 3. We did the first one on racial justice, the second one we highlighted our staff, and this third one is focused on a sustainability concept. It's energy management, but we are doing this a little bit different, where we've kind of got an interview here, we're covering one report, and we're trying it out. So let's see how it goes. So, Jay, this is a little different, huh?
That's right, and Scott, I know we're hitting people's podcast apps in the middle of the month as opposed to when we usually release on the first Friday of every month. And it makes me wonder, it's like if folks look at their screen and see us coming up mid-month for a second episode, like, is it strange to see us mid-month? Like remember you used to see your teacher outside of classroom as a kid? I mean, is it strange like that, or is it cause elation?
Well, hopefully, I mean, that's awkward. I feel like when you see your teacher out and about, like, oh, hello. Do you have things to teach me, or you're a real person?
Mrs. Smith, what are you buying eggs for?
So, yeah, I mean, let's get into this a little bit, Jay. So, energy management. I mean, this is a topic we could devote a whole series of episodes to, right? To like how people manage their energy so that they're efficient, that they're getting it from the sources they want to get it from. But we think that this bonus episode is nice because it presents timely findings from a 2021 report that Atrius put out analyzing trends in the space. So we've got a nice slew of episodes coming up, Jay. Atrius wanted this out there ASAP, and we wanted to get it to the Definers ASAP, so we said, well, let's try something new. And we want your feedback, though. I mean, if you don't like this mid-month thing, it is awkward for you, or the format is, we like your typical format, don't try these new things. Okay, well, just let us know. We're up for all feedback. Hosts, HOSTS, at sustainabilitydefined.com. And then I think, Jay, we were also interested in doing this because we just put out an update to our offshore wind episode. And so we felt like, okay, we touched on energy a bit there, not in a totally full way because it was just sort of updating an episode. Why don't we kind of complete it a little bit and touch on energy some more?
Right. I feel like there's never enough we could devote to the general theme of energy, but I know we're doing our darndest here, aren't we?
So, Jay, this will be a shorter episode, a little bit more focused, and it's really on this report Atrius put out. So tell the Definers about that.
Right. So between September and October of 2021, Atrius and Smart Energy Decisions, which is the first web-based information resource dedicated exclusively to addressing the information needs of commercial and industrial electric power customers. So these two groups deployed a 20-question survey, again in fall of 2021, to survey energy, facility, and sustainability leaders in various organizations across 7 industries. So their respondents range in industry from government, higher education, industrial and commercial, among others, with employee headcounts ranging everywhere from under 100 people to over 10,000.
And we believe this survey provides valuable insights into how sustainability professionals across industries are scrutinizing their energy consumption and incorporating tools to better management. So our hope is that this episode will educate all Definers interested in the space and help folks chart their path to better energy management. It could be in their house, but mainly for their company, and no matter where they're at along their journey. So a little bit about our guest here, who's going to walk us through some of the key findings. Her name is Lauren Scott. She's the Vice President of Marketing and Sustainability of Intelligent Spaces Group, which includes the brand Atrius. Lauren specializes in translating climate initiatives into meaningful action to deliver on commitments to the building and renewable sectors.
Lauren was nominated as a 2020 Woman of Inspiration by the Universal Women's Network and was shortlisted as Industry Woman of the Year by the Control Trends Awards in 2020. We are super excited to have her on the show today. Let's head on over.
And Jay, just so people know, let's give the people a little heads up, given that they're tuning in for a bonus episode. We will be back, our normal schedule, first Friday of the month. In March, we'll be hitting your feeds with an episode on recycled content. So keep a lookout for that.
Get pumped.
All right, Definers, we are joined in our special bonus episode here today by Lauren Scott, Vice President, Marketing and Sustainability for the Intelligent Spaces Group at Acuity Brands. We're going to dive deep into Atrius's 2021 State of Energy Management Report. Lauren, thanks for joining us all the way from Canada.
Thanks for having me.
So you are a sustainability professional. You have a marketing background. I mean, tell us about your interest in sustainability. Was it something that you've had for a long time? Were you doing other maybe marketing and communications roles, and then they asked you to talk more about sustainability and you got interested? Tell us more about your background in this area.
Sure. Well, the first real memory that I have in terms of being passionate about the environmental movement is I was about 6 years old. And I remember my sister and I got together and pulled together actually all of our Archie comics at the time and held a garage sale in my parents' driveway, raising money for the World Wildlife Fund. So that was probably my first memory, and it definitely continued over the years from there. The first memory that I have where it was combining both the environmental side but also the business side was when I was in university, and this is going to date myself slightly, was during the Inconvenient Truth Tour with Al Gore, and he was visiting all the universities. And we were about 5,000 students in attendance, and his opening speaker was David Suzuki, who is an environmental leader definitely recognized here in Canada. And he asked students to individually stand up depending on their department. And when he was talking about sciences or arts, you would see hundreds of students stand up. When you got to business students, we were maximum a handful or two.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking in that moment, if I care about the environment and I want to be in business, it's really going to be important to take that on going forward if there was that little representation in that moment. So that really kind of shaped the direction of my career from that point forward.
Well, I love the Archie comics story, but also the business school thing. I mean, that has really changed. I mean, business schools today, they almost have to have these classes because that's what the students want. And so it's interesting to hear. I don't think it was very long ago, but at least back then, there weren't as many business students who had this front of mind. So it's great that you've followed through on your convictions and doing what you're doing today.
Yeah, it's definitely evolved. I remember at the time, it was maybe the last paragraph per chapter would maybe talk about corporate responsibility.
Yeah, just throw it in there.
Yeah, so it definitely started then. But at the time, I actually founded a student association, which was the first for the business school for the undergrad and graduate students, incorporating this idea of sustainability just to give better access to the student groups who were interested in sustainability. So it's come leaps and bounds since then over the last decade and a half, but certainly it was we had to be a little scrappy back then.
So Lauren, it sounds like you've got a fantastic background covering all different types of disciplines, but could you tell us more about your role with Atrius and Acuity Brands? And then based off of the experience that you shared, how in your role do you energize people to embrace energy management specifically as a critical lever to address climate change?
Sure. So my background is definitely in the PR, communications, marketing side of the world. And while I was developing that, I was also on the side volunteering as part of the board of Sierra Club Canada. And so I was able to have a little bit of the parallels of the two worlds coming together in my current role. So right now, what I do is definitely lead the marketing team for Atrius, as well as a couple of other brands under the Intelligent Spaces Group. And then the combining with the sustainability role was that we saw that there was lots of phenomenal grassroots initiatives happening at the company in terms of operations, in terms of programs, but nobody really centralizing it. So about 6 or so months ago, we formalized the role where half my time can be dedicated towards the ESG side of the business. In terms of addressing engagement, it might sound odd having marketing and sustainability in the same title, but I think that storytelling is so important in terms of engagement. It is really overwhelming sometimes when we view everything going on in the world from an environmental or social standpoint. And for a company to be able to centralize those stories and to just really be able to showcase solutions of moving the needle in terms of sustainability is just so important. So it's been about finding those stories and sharing those to create that engagement level.
All right, so let's start drilling down into the theme of this episode, which is your energy management survey by Atrius. So We gave an overview of the report in the intro just before we jumped over to this interview segment. But Lauren, I'm wondering if you could perhaps paint us a more vivid picture of the types of industries that your survey's respondents come from. Are they coming from local school systems, Fortune 500 companies? Like who comprises the survey that we're going to be diving into here a little bit deeper?
Yeah, the list of participants, we had over 600 participants in this year's survey. There was kind of standardization in terms of who was responding. It definitely was more on the energy, facility, and sustainability leader standpoint. But there was diversity in terms of who answered them and what kind of companies. So it was the combination of both Atrius's contacts as well as Smart Energy Decision, who we co-put on the survey with. So we did really see everything from universities, higher education, to the aviation world, smaller organizations that were being very strategic, and then some of those larger players as well that had more robust ESG programs.
You've been doing this survey for like 3 years now, and we're wondering, tell us more about the purpose. Like, you guys could do a survey on anything. Like, who are you hoping reads it, and what do you hope they do?
In leading up to the results for this year's survey, we were able to share them on a webinar, and we had some great case studies from both the city of Orlando and Boston University and how they were able to use the survey. So I think those specific examples of our immediate customers and customers being able to leverage the results is certainly useful. But as someone working in the sustainability world, I think sometimes we feel really isolated in terms of our work.
Yeah.
And I personally felt like this report allows for that community to come together, even though we might be one or two individuals per organization of thousands of employees. In seeing the report, you're able to see others who are in similar situations, who are maybe just getting an ESG program off the ground, or more robust teams, but it just allows to see the progress across different industries and across different organizations to help move the needle as a community overall.
And so speaking of where all these organizations are in their sustainability journeys, one of the first questions the survey asks is where a respondent believes their organization is on this journey to use energy data to manage their business. And so I find this very interesting. So I'm going to walk through the options that respondents can choose from and then follow up with the question for you, Lauren. So in the survey, you're filling out the survey, you have 5 options as to where you can say your organization is. Number 1 is at the beginning, described as putting manual data in a spreadsheet. Number 2, you're at your first steps, which is automating utility bill data into a centralized system. Number 3, as we're progressing along here, the option is, quote, picking up speed, accessing real-time data to identify anomalies and performance. The 4th of 5 is what's called well on our way, using sub-metering data for greater building performance visibility. And then the last option is ahead of the crowd. So we're saying at this point, you're mainly focusing on fault detection and diagnostics. So those are the 5 options that respondents are given. And we know that we're looking at the 2021 survey here. Relative to the 2020 survey, the number of respondents saying that they were well on their way or ahead of the crowd, which were the last 2, numbers 4 and 5 of the options, actually dropped by 2% and 5% respectively.
Which we wouldn't expect, right, Jay?
Right. And so I think it's an important caveat, right? So we understand that the number of respondents in 2021 was actually higher than 2020, which perhaps might skew percentages. But Lauren, that piece aside, I'm curious why you think this drop might be. Perhaps as people learn more about this growing space, might they feel that their pathway to true energy management is perhaps longer than they'd originally anticipated?
I think you hit the nail right on the head there. As part of this storytelling overall, we're now becoming more and more aware of what other organizations are doing. And inevitably, we're going to all realize that we're very much at the very beginning of our shared sustainability journey. So there's so much more that we can do, which of course can feel a little bit overwhelming at times. But on the flip side of that, I think it can be very inspiring for those working on sustainability within their respective organizations. So probably over the past year, it gave that opportunity for those in the space to learn more about what's happening. I was taking a course recently and they referred to it as the alphabet soup of sustainability of all the different standards out there. So as those global standards start to align, And they're able to kind of help showcase what really needs to be met in terms of sustainability. I think that just overall awareness is increasing. So that better understanding of where we are all on our own journeys is just that much clearer. So while it can seem a little bit like a downturn, I think it is really just testament to the fact that we're all moving forward as organizations.
Yeah, Lauren, I might jump in because I think what you're touching on is actually an interesting theme relative to this idea of eco-anxiety that Scott and I have covered in previous episodes, where, perhaps as your understanding of the real crises that we face grows, perhaps there's this growing sense of, oh my gosh, there's a million things that I need to be doing. And, it's almost the paralysis by analysis idea. But to the survey's point, right, leveling the playing field and understanding where your organization perhaps is relative to others is kind of that first step in actually understanding, yeah, we've got crises here, but we need to survey the scene and understand how we can start moving forward in the right way.
I do believe at the heart of engagement is really individuals feeling like they can help create positive change. So certainly the climate can feel overwhelming right now with everything going on. And just having a path forward in terms of individual steps and contributions that we can make is certainly part of clearing a path in what can feel like a really, really dark cloud. So that is an important step, I think, for individuals and organizations overall. Certainly from my experience within Acuity Brands and working on the ESG file overall, is it can certainly seem overwhelming, all the different steps that need to be taken, but you really do need to have those initial steps in terms of the broader vision. So things, for example, like we use the Atrius Building Insights to help with our Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions calculations and reporting. And so it is just, step one is really getting that visibility into information. You can't really gauge success unless you're able to track improvements or progress. And part of that is just creating that benchmark as to where are we today. And then you can create a path forward as to where do we want to go. So it can be a little bit of a slog at the beginning in terms of just pulling together all of that information. But then certainly from there, you're able to build out metrics and KPIs to build that path forward as an organization.
Schlog. I love it, Lauren.
So Lauren, we're talking about the services you all provide, and we've mentioned some organizations now, but it'd be nice if we could kind of dive into some of these examples. I think that would help our listeners. Can you talk about any of the companies or organizations that have used the survey, used your services to really reduce their energy use and better manage their energy?
Okay. A great example is Weber State University, which uses Atrius Building Insights to compare building performance and even to prioritize retrofit work on their campus. So in 2013, after noticing that some of their buildings in a new part of the campus were consuming a large amount of energy, their sustainability team came together to see ways in which they could specifically target buildings for infrastructure improvements. Initially, the team used Building Insights data to pull some numbers for these buildings and to estimate savings. The team estimated that savings for the building was about 20% of their energy use, which was easy enough for them to then justify the ROI of doing a retrofit of the space. Once all was said and done, they actually went back to the building and were able to do a measurement just to make sure that their estimate in terms of savings was accurate. And they had actually, when they had assumed it was 20%, they were under by 10%. When all was said and done, Weber State was able to save over 30% overall, which is equivalent to about $20,000 in savings on an annualized basis. And that 30% savings or the $20,000 is really just that first project that they had on the one building. Since that time, since 2013, Weber State has saved over $2.3 million with Atrius Building Insights.
Okay, so Lauren, you bring up some really interesting points in your response to Scott's last question in this idea of potential sustainability solutions, which is, of course, something that your reports and your survey covers. So let's talk about what the potential solutions look like behind respondents' energy and sustainability goals. So the top 3 tactics per the survey are higher efficiency HVAC equipment, which is heating, ventilation, and air conditioning. 84% of respondents marked that one. Number 2 is lighting upgrades at 79%. And then number 3, was upgraded building automation systems at 78%. So our first question, Lauren, were there any surprises in this list, or perhaps any particular solutions that you thought would have made the top 3 but didn't?
No, I think that these 3 are really the classic formula that you'll see for buildings. For example, if you're looking at LEED certification, these tend to be 3 of the key areas and certainly ways in which energy management can really shine within a built space. For example, I mean, my background is in the HVAC and BMS side, so that is definitely one way that we have seen that we're able to greatly reduce the energy use within a building. But lighting might be the less obvious approach. But clearly in the answers, individuals here are seeing that it is a very cost-effective way to manage energy. It tends to be really inexpensive to just retrofit to LED lighting, for example, to have that immediate impact on energy use within a space. So having the HVAC and lighting side come together and be integrated under a building management system is really kind of a key way to be able to move the needle in terms of energy management.
Right. So I think you used that BMS acronym earlier, which is Building Management Systems. Is that right?
Yes. Sorry for using the acronym. So BMS is Building Management System. Sometimes you'll see it interchangeable with a building automation system, but it really is the concept of pulling together your multiple different systems under one given space and having that centralized control.
All right. So we're getting into the alphabet soup of energy management in this episode. That is good.
Exactly.
And so, Lauren, you alluded to this, but let's say a definer is perhaps listening from an organization that has not yet gotten moving on energy and sustainability initiatives. My question to you is, which of the 3 strategies that we just mentioned tend to be the lowest hanging fruit for most organizations? Sounded like you might have mentioned that lighting upgrades might be that. Is that right?
Certainly, lighting can be a very cost-effective way to get in there. But perhaps one missing piece to all of this, so we have the BMS, we have HVAC, we have lighting, is the idea of centralizing information. So again, the more effective the sustainability individual within an organization can be in terms of looking at strategy and how to improve the overall ESG file, the better. So if they don't have to go and run around and pull information from different Excel sheets and are able to centralize the information into one platform or one dashboard, then that can certainly help be an important step for an organization as well.
And so let's say they're following this formula you're talking about, and then they want to communicate it to their employees, their shareholders, whoever. We did see in the report that it found that there's an interesting correlation between those who identify themselves as advanced along their energy journey and how they share their progress. This group, the more advanced one, is more likely to communicate their initiatives on public-facing dashboards, 18%, than respondents overall, 11%. So do you think that there's maybe some greenwashing going on where organizations are thinking that they're doing well and then touting it? Or what do you think is going on with the dashboards? I mean, do you think that those are really effective tools and is what's really going on? Or do you think that in some instances they're used in ways they shouldn't be?
No, I think this comes back to the idea of storytelling. And I don't think it is greenwashing per se. It is really just organizations helping to share their individual stories. And just sometimes that is a key piece in getting employees or associates engaged overall, or even tenants in a building, that if they're unaware of where the building is on in terms of kind of becoming smarter or greener, then they're just going to be less engaged overall. So I think just having that dashboard and the visualization is really just such an important part of the journey for a building or for a company going forward.
And have you seen anyone display the dashboard in a way that gets people's attention more, either where they locate it or the design of it or something that maybe you want to use as an example?
A great example of this is actually really at the start of Atrius Building Insights. One of the first applications of the tool was at Weber State University, where Jane Stewart, who was energy manager there, was able to create almost a competitive environment using the dashboards. She was trying to find ways for students to get involved in terms of the energy use of the different buildings on campus. And so she leveraged the dashboards to create a competition between the different dormitories and the different buildings to see who could be more energy efficient. So I think that gamification tends to really help create engagement overall. So to be able to see the dashboards used in that way was very creative and innovative.
Yeah, we did a similar thing when I was at Georgetown University, where in the freshman dorms, I remember there was a competition who could reduce their energy the most. And you got a pizza party for the dorm if you won. So that also motivates college students. Throwing that out there.
Well, Scott, close the loop. Did your dorm win?
No.
Oh, man.
I would have remembered that pizza.
Would have been the best pizza you probably ever had. Okay, well, I want to keep us moving here because we've touched on a lot of interesting themes here, and I want to keep that going and segue us into this idea of organizational sustainability and the challenges that it might pose. So, for the third consecutive year, the lack of time to review energy management information systems dashboards is the top barrier to successfully implementing an energy management information system within an organization. 49% of respondents said that that's one of the top barriers. The teams responsible for creating and meeting energy reduction goals often, as we've talked about, spend countless hours in manual, time-intensive data analysis projects. I do plenty of that at my work, and it is quite tedious. And Lauren, to your earlier point, the hours spent on these tasks do make it difficult for teams to present ROI on existing initiatives and really leaves less time for teams to use data to actually develop strategies and action plans to meet their goals. So, Lauren, your team notes that by automating data management and other manual processes, energy teams can instead focus on the business critical needs of reaching their goals, communicating progress, and working cross-departmentally to further integrate sustainability goals within their business. Makes a lot of sense. Energy management systems, of course, deliver this automation and support by capturing, centralizing, and reporting on data. So the first question is, where should definers who feel like this describes where they are in their organization's sustainability journeys go if they'd like to learn more about these systems?
There are some really great associations within the built space. So again, to add more acronyms in there, there's ASHRAE is a great one. Smart Energy Decisions, the group that we put on the survey with, is also another great opportunity. Certainly, I would encourage you to go to atrius.com to get more details. But just overall, I think we're starting to see trends within the built space. So any of the leading organizations, you're going to see dashboards or visualization and means of communication being an important part of those standards. So whether it's the well building standard or even LEED buildings, which are tied together, but you do see that visualization and dashboards as being a key part of it. So you can check out any of those websites or again, atrius.com for more information.
And a second question relative to these organizational challenges and barriers. We thought it was pretty interesting in the 2021 survey that when asked if respondents feel that they've been given the budget to achieve the ESG goals set by their organization, 45% said no. That's relative to 33% that said yes, and then 22% that said the question did not apply to them. So Lauren, I'm curious, why do you think that so many respondents said no?
I think this goes back to where we are in terms of organizations pulling in ESG. For so long, I really do think that sustainability was almost siloed into this nice to have philanthropic add-on to an organization. And the next step in that is having sustainability maybe an individual dedicated role pulled into the organization or created within the organization. So that is one step forward, but it is still a little bit siloed in that way. So I think that the next step is to go from ESG to the concept of F plus ESG, or kind of pulling in that financial strategic component and having it directly embedded within each department. So it's kind of the next step on the stepping stones. The fact that there would be individuals dedicated to sustainability within an organization is already proof that the progress is taking place within the organization, but certainly an important step for organizations who want to really move the needle are going to be incorporating sustainability in each department, which would also then mean that it is not a dedicated budget just for sustainability. The budget will be found within each department because it will be so deeply ingrained in the strategy of each team.
F plus ESG is a new one for me. So it sounds like you think as the financial piece gets better integrated, would you say that you expect this number to go down where people are maybe saying, yes, I do have the budget to actually achieve these goals?
That's certainly the hope. And again, we need to diversify within the organization who is focused on sustainability. We need everybody from R&D in terms of developing the energy use of a developed product to procurement to on-site production. It really needs to be part of everyone's planning, and that includes budgets. So certainly that's the direction that we need to go to see great progress.
Yeah, and let's actually go to looking ahead. So I'm glad we talked about the barriers, but let's turn our eyes towards the future. So given the results of this report and given the work you're doing day in and day out, can you talk to us about some of the trends you expect to see in energy management that the definers can look out for over the next year and further?
Absolutely. Well, if the past 2 years have taught us anything, is that the built space is never going to go back to quote unquote normal. We really have to be creative about how we're using our spaces. And I think that that's really going to be seen directly in the trends that we're going with. So those who are renting spaces, for example, are really going to have to make them as attractive as possible. But this can also be seen with higher education in terms of pulling in students. And part of that attractiveness is really going to be creating greener spaces. So we need to make that a priority. I definitely see this across the board in terms of commercial spaces trying to rent out their space right now. That includes, for example, seeing BMS, building management systems, at scale, as well as having that visibility into how green a space is, but probably even how safe a space is. People are really concerned about air quality now. So those dashboards can pull in all of the key metrics that individuals really do care about in the built space. I do think we're going to start seeing those ESG goals integrated within each department within an organization. So we're going to start seeing that ramp up. And unfortunately, and that's definitely something that we saw in the survey, was that limited budgets and resources continue to be the biggest barrier. Certainly what we're seeing with the component shortages, labor shortages, we know that there are going to be restricted resources. So it's going to be really about who can be creative in terms of really having progress on their ESG files within perhaps a slightly constricted space. And then just from a technology standpoint, certainly the trend is we've often seen on-premise technology, but now we are going from the edge to cloud solutions. So we are thinking much beyond just the individual buildings and seeing how we can pull together multiple portfolios to make them as sustainable as possible. And I think just the last piece on that is that ESG is one of those unique areas where we're no longer siloed as organizations. I think it's where we might otherwise be client and provider or even competitors. We're now coming together. We realize that if we're really going to see any progress in terms of sustainability, we have to come together in terms of these unique new partnerships. So I find that very encouraging. And I think we're going to just start to see those more and more going forward. For example, Acuity Brands recently signed a partnership with Microsoft in terms of their sustainability cloud. So there's these really unique opportunities for organizations that might be otherwise not really working together or in very different roles to kind of come together to help just move sustainability forward as meaningfully and as quickly as possible.
Wonderful. And Lauren, as we move to the end of this episode, we now have to ask you our famous last question, which is our party fact question. So let's say we are in a building that has a building management information system. It's operating super smoothly. It's sub-metered. Everyone that operates the building can see exactly what its energy management looks like. What would you say to other folks in this happy hour in this space? What kind of stat would you share with them to convey how important energy management truly is that would cause them to just drop their drink in amazement? We've been talking a lot about stats in this episode, but if you had to pick just one as your party fact for energy management, what would it be?
A stat that I always find really interesting is that when we think of reducing our impact on the planet, we often think of headline grabbing industries like electric vehicles. But the built space itself actually accounts for 28% of annual global greenhouse gas emissions. So this is a really unique space for us to be able to move the needle in terms of reducing emissions. And it's not maybe the most trendy one or the one where we're seeing the most news articles, but this is a real opportunity for us to be able to move the needle. We spend, I think it's up over 90% of our time indoors. So to be able to change and improve the spaces where we spend the majority of our time is really just such a unique opportunity.
I love it. Thank you so much for organizing, for coming on. We are excited to share this with our definers out there.
We appreciate your support and helping us keep it going.
Thank you.